Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to INC Live and welcome to a very special Memorial Day episode. Hopefully, though, it won't be the kind of very special episode like those 90s sitcoms. It is, of course, Memorial Day here, and myself, Carl Baimage, alongside Joe Neal there on the right-hand side of your screen. We thought we would reward all of our fans and followers by giving you a little bit of a Q&A, and also, if you are a subscriber to the Patreon page, this is a chance for the wider audience to know what we get up to behind that paywall, Joe.
Absolutely. I thought this was going to be like those 90 ones. I thought we were going to do like a clip show. It's like here's every time Joe Neal offended Valentina fans. Like it's like everyone remembers all the classic bits between the two. Carl's hatred of Amanda Nunes.
I was thinking more with very special episodes, so like you having like a caffeine pill addiction and have to talk about the seriousness of drug use.
Oh no, I remember those episodes. I remember Seinfeld. They did a clip show episode, and I think that's the only episode I skipped when I was rewatching the show recently. Ugh, the very special episodes, like my addiction, diet
I
soda
will say,
currently.
the one clip show I do think is very good, though. I still think that first segment of the first Simpsons clip show, like the April Fool's bit, that's brilliant.
Well, I think when it's an April Fool's joke, I'm 10,000% in. Like, especially like the Simpsons. There was a period of time though, almost like a whole decade, where it's like, no, they can just do whatever. Like they can get away with anything because they're so good.
And and then the
So that
Leprechaun
makes
jockeys
sense.
happened.
That's pretty. It's funny to me, but more so like I'm not laughing at the episode or with the episode. I'm laughing at the concept of the episode.
So we did put the question out on all of our social media feeds, on our Twitter feed, and also our main page there on the YouTube channel itself. So we managed to get ourselves a few questions here, some relating to the channel, some relating to mixed martial arts, in some cases relating to ourselves. So I thought anything relating to the main channel, I'll be very happy to answer. Anything relating to INC Live, that's sort of your baby, Joe, so I think you can cover it from that regard. So we'll start off by asking a question which was posted to us on Twitter first and foremost, and this is from the Unified Rules of Podcast, and he says, do you ever miss MMA how it was, or the fighters who used to be part of it? For me, I miss the names who were in the sport and in their prime from 2006 to 2017.
It's a really good question. Um, I'd be lying if I said no. Is kind of the vibe I'm at. I remember when I don't know if this is like me just jaded as a jaded old man coming up on 30, but being excited for every single fight night, every single because we only got like one fight night a month, and then there wasn't fights every weekend. Like during COVID, it was pretty cool. Or hold on, during 2020, it was pretty cool because there was nothing going on. Like I was working from home, or I just started working from home. My best friend, he's my roommate as well. He didn't have like, or his job put him on bereavement, so he was always home. And if we weren't like playing video games on the weekend, being bored out of our minds, then we were watching fights, and that was something new, like and fun. But like I remember being excited for get this Houston Alexander and Ryan Jensen back in the day.
Now
Like
that's hardcore.
yeah, I remember being pumped because I was like, hey, Ryan Jensen's got like a pretty good arm triangle, and Houston Alexander can just KO him. Like this fight shouldn't be more than like a round or two. This could be fun. And I remember being pumped for Ryan Bader Keith Jardine, which I think was on a fight night, or was that on the Australia card with Kane and Little Nog? It was around that time. But every pay per view felt special. Like we mentioned on the previous show, like Kane and Little Nog didn't need a title to sell a pay per view, and it isn't the lowest selling pay per view ever. um, it's just kind of I kind of miss it personally. As I mean, especially like I miss Pride era like the most because Pride is my favorite organization ever. But I kind of miss the names like Kenny Florian. Oh man, I remember Kenny Florian was awesome. Uh, Jorge Santiago was super fun. Um, so was Misaki is really good. But Joe Daddy Stevenson having a really good run. Uh, Spencer Fisher, who has a pretty rough story, but Spencer Fisher, Sam Stout.
I love that trilogy.
Yeah, it's one of the best ever. No one talks about it. It's so good. Um, you know, the welterweight was awesome. I remember like when Paulo Thiago showed up. It's like he KO'd Josh Koscheck like in the first round. Everybody's like, "Whoa, who is this guy?" And then John Fitch is him, and it just kind of hurts his hype a little bit.
Hey, that
But
main event is UFC 100.
yeah, it's the biggest main event of all time if you think about it. Because if UFC 100 is the biggest card of all time, then that's the biggest main event of all time. I don't make the rules. um, but Martin Kamen, like Swick, Alan Belcher, like oh man, there was like that was like back when. That's probably the last time I will say 205 was good. Was like in that era, like in that Rampage champion, then Forrest, Rashad, Machida, Shogun. Like that's probably the last time 205 was stacked, like pretty stacked. And then I think John Jones came in at like the perfect time. Like everyone's starting to slow down, and it's like here we go. Like Rashad was like probably the only guy who wasn't slowing down at that time. Heavyweight was awesome. You had Randy Couture still in there. Randy Couture, Little Nog was sick. That fight, or not Little Nog, Big Nog was amazing. That fight's a really good actually. Um, and I'd be lying if I said no. I mean, I like a lot of what we have now.
I think my nostalgia, I'm nostalgic for that same sort of era, but I would say it's for different reasons. I think that I've always been a believer in any walk of life, whether that's in MMA, pro wrestling, or any kind of sport, any kind of business. Competition breeds quality. And I think around that sort of 2009, 2010 time, when you had Strikeforce keeping the UFC on its toes, and it raised everybody's game. I think that because the UFC don't have that sort of outright strong competitor. I know the PFL wants to be that, and there's been a lot of issues with the PFL recently, which is a discussion for another topic. But I think Strikeforce really got the best out of the UFC, and you saw that with the quality of the cards around that time. But also as well, it felt big. Like George St. Pierre main events were getting 700,000, 800,000. Brock was regularly breaking 1 million. Him versus Carwin was one of the biggest fights of all time, around that sort of 116 range. Yes,
literally
juiciest as well.
Biggest, mega juiced up.
I think if we ever do heavyweight title fights as a retro review topic, I think we've got to nominate Lesnar Carwin.
I know what I hope wins, but Lesnar Carwin probably winning. I'm gonna root for Kane Lesnar because I have a very fond memory.
You're a big Kane fan, aren't you? Yep.
Yes, I am. Only
a card I'd love to see is, and it could be a nominee as well, 31. I mean, we're going proper old school here, but Randy Couture versus Pedro Hizo was really good for the time, and the undercard as well delivers. Yeah,
that fight's amazing. I remember when I had the box set still somewhere of the best UFC fights of all time, the 100 best. And I remember seeing that fight on there. I was like, I don't remember this fight. And I was very pleasantly surprised.
And I would say the sort of golden age of the UFC, I would say it ran until about, 2015. Like when 189 happens, the Reebok deal comes in, USADA go away. Obviously, it's like the rise of Con Ed. It feels like a real fine line between that era of MMA is over, and now we're in this new era. And what we got afterwards was still very good. But I think it has got slightly watered down, and I think having so many events at the Apex doesn't help things. I know the Apex gets a lot of criticism anyway. But one of the things I always did like pre-2020, even if you had this sort of nondescript fight night, at least you were going to places like, you would do cards in Singapore, you'd do cards in mainland Europe, so you at least have like a couple of the local fighters there. It was a different feeling. You at least got something from it. Yeah.
Fights in Oklahoma, like Chiesa,
Kevin Lee,
Michael Chiesa, and Keith, Kevin Lee. I almost said Keith Lee. That's a fight. Yeah, Keith Lee, or Bearcat, as some people know. But yeah, like Michael Guessa, Kevin Lee was in town, and what's her face? Felice Herrig fought someone who
Justin
pooped.
Kish.
I knew it. I was like, I couldn't remember, but I was like, was it her or was it someone else? My brain said Jessica Rose Clark, and I'm like, I hope she didn't poop. I was a fan of hers.
Doing very well in
Uh,
Muay Thai though.
I heard that. Yeah. She'd probably be in my girl stable, admittingly.
Yeah. So,
But
but then again as well, that's just our own personal opinion. I think that
yeah.
I think a lot of it stems from when you first started getting interested in the sport. It's like anything. Like the Doctor
Mm.
Who you grew up with is always the best one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David Tennant for me.
I would say
So
Eccleston.
yeah, I see. I started watching Eccleston, and 'cause when I saw him, I was like, "Oh my God, this is the villain from one of my favorite movies, 28 Days Later." It's like, I guess I'll check the show
If
out. I
you
like this guy, and then I
if you
just
get
fell
the
in love with
chance, I
David
would
Tennant.
recommend watching something Christopher Eccleston was in called Hillsborough. Like a really dark
Hmm.
drama series, but it's one of those shows which you know is brilliant, but it's hard to rewatch. Yes.
Oh, that's one of those. I think one thing we were trying to say, and we're not trying to say it, and I'll be the one to take the bullet for us, Carl, is the day MMA died, if we want to call it that, was the second Jose Aldo decided, how about I just throw a wild left hook and let this inferior fighter one shot me? No, I'm just it's my most hated fight of all time. Do not. I'm serious. If you love me, do not nominate that for the retro review series, please God, because I would rather watch Carlos Esparza Rose Namajunas like Clockwork Orange style. Yes,
Well,
yes. Then watch.
Carla won
Then
me a
watch
lot of
that
money
fight.
that night, so I like that a little bit more than others.
That's probably the worst fight I've ever seen. And I've seen fights, and I've seen the stinkers of Pride, because I've seen probably every Pride fight at some point or another. Pride had some awful fights too, people forget, and it's still my favorite.
So, quite a simple question here over on YouTube. This is from Strange Gloves, who asks, who do you consider the GOAT? I would lean
GSP.
GSP as well.
Yeah, I think of it. Everyone has their own way of probably like thinking about it, right? Um, I score it a little differently. I don't include drug cheats, but let's say hypothetically I do include drug cheats. It's GSP.
I'd lean that way as well, because like even if you
Easy.
did include people like Anderson Silva,
John
I wouldn't
Jones.
even consider John Jones, to be honest. I think
Even if you consider him, I don't. I think he's three. If you consider him, he's three, because there's no way he's better than Mighty Mouse or
because I
GSP.
think the thing with GSP was a great all-rounder. Like obviously his striking was fantastic. Like if he knew he was fighting a wrestler, he keeps
Unbelievable.
standing and just piece you apart with his jab. Hell of a good grappler, which is amazing given he came from a striking background. And even though he did lose fights early in his career, he avenged them both. So he doesn't have that sort of stigma
Yeah.
against him in the way that... Because Anderson lost fights early in his career. Like he got to...
Yeah,
He avenged
the
Yushin
Yushin
Nakami,
Okami
but
one
there
at least,
was that fight... Ryo Chonin.
Uh, Ryu Shonen did it, and then I want to call him Masawa, but I forget his name. Daiji Takase, I
Takase.
believe. Triangle choked Takase. Yeah, triangle choked him.
Yeah.
In Pride, because he had two losses in Pride. I think he's only like 4-2 in Pride. But I think even if you count him, I don't think he makes
Like
it
the only person I
anymore.
think could come close is Mighty Mouse. Yeah.
Yeah,
But also
he's
as
the only
well,
one.
this is very subjective. I know there's a lot of people which might disagree with this, but I think if you're putting that label on someone of the best fighter of all time, you want them to be a good representative of the sport. George St. Pierre is. Like, GSP was, to
Yeah,
the best of that we know, he was a clean fighter. Seems like a thoroughly nice person. Like, that's one of the issues I have with people who want to try and put John Jones on this pedestal, is that, yes, he might have the accolades and the wins and the talent. Are you proud of that guy representing your sport? Because I'm personally not. I gotta look at it this way.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at cycling, for example, Lance Armstrong failed those drug tests. He basically admitted that he encouraged pretty much everyone on that tour to void themselves up, and he was quite rightly blacklisted from cycling. Cycling didn't put him on a pedestal and say, oh, let's just ignore all that, he's still the best of all time. And yet John Jones does pretty much the same thing. Regular drugs cheat, and a history of doing some pretty awful things away from the cage. And yet you still have people, and in particular Dana White, putting this guy on a pedestal.
I think Dana's doing it because he's the flavor of the month. If George was around, he'd be saying George's. But George didn't play to the beat of Dana's drum.
No.
Ever. And Dana hates it. Dana hates him for it. I don't care what he says. Dana probably hates GSP for him. For that. Because he was upset because he thought Johnny Hendricks, like a lot of people, even me at the time, thought Johnny Hendricks beat GSP. I've watched that fight probably like 20 times since, right? Because it's a really good fight, actually. I think GSP wins. I think GSP wins that fight. I think it's really close, though. But GSP, but also Johnny Hendricks was on, he was on that TJ Dillashaw stuff, Team Alpha Male. Like, he was on that. He was on something, man, because there's no way that fall from grace was that sharp when you saw it.
And then you also look at the way he's treated people like Randy Couture or Chris Cyborg, like anybody who pushes back against Dana and wants to beat to their own drum, Dana will do their best to try and downplay them and erase them.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. You know, I mean, Cyborg is literally, I when it comes to female MMA, Cyborg, in men's MMA, it's GSP. In women's MMA, I say Amanda Nunes. Don't fire me. Kidding. But I think it's close between her and Cyborg. Like, I think it's Nunes. I think Nunes' legacy is probably a little stronger. You know, I mean, she's beaten a lot of champions because now we can add Rocky Pennington on it. You know, hey, she's a champion now. You know, just saying. Just kidding. If Aldana wins the title, that's another one, making that legacy look better. But in all seriousness, Cyborg's number 2 for sure. But you wouldn't think that the way Dana talks about her.
What Chris has going for it, in my opinion, in this argument, is the longevity, the winning streak, and the importance to the sport. Like, her versus Gina was a sort of ceiling-breaking moment. And some people don't put weight behind that. I personally do.
How different do you think women's MMA is if Gina Carano didn't get up from having a dominant position in Mount, where she could have easily finished the fight? If Gina wins that fight,
the UFC introduced the women's divisions 2-3 years earlier.
Right. Absolutely. And then one of us marries Gina Carano, right? And saves her from leaving Star Wars because she needed. We would have been like, maybe don't tweet that. You know. And then, or actually, most likely, if I married her, I'd be like, yeah, I hate Star Wars. Go ahead and get fired.
It's a good thing you're talking about women's MMA here, because our next question comes from Benzel7988. He asks, would women's UFC be more entertaining if they replaced the current divisions with middleweight, light heavyweight, and heavyweight?
I saw this question, and I had to think about what he was meaning by it. And I'm going to answer it thinking under the assumption that, what if we replace the women's divisions with women's heavyweight,
light
heavyweight, women's middleweight? Yeah, that's how I'm kind of determining this. And I'm not, hey man, I'm not ragging on you for this question. I'm just going to say it how it is. You know, there's no chance in hell. Like, it's more entertaining because I don't know how to break this to you, bud, but light heavyweight, heavyweight, and middleweight are not more entertaining divisions than anything below 145 pounds. Anything below 145 pounds. I would rather watch, hot take here, I would rather watch women's 125 pounds and 115 pounds usually watch one of their fights over a normal middle of the road apex heavyweight fight. I've seen enough Jairzinho Rosenstruck fights in my life, I think. That's all I'm trying to say. I've seen enough Jairzinho Rosenstruck fights. Women's heavyweight would be just Gabby Garcia pile driving people.
I will say, have done the rounds on YouTube, and I have seen some women's heavyweight MMA fights. The quality is very low, and also as well, I think that if you're expecting these kind of Gabby Garcia types of like 250 pounds of muscle, they are very few and far between. Like heavyweight women's MMA fighters aren't that kind of build. I'll put it that way.
No, because most men aren't that kind of build as well. You know what I mean? Like the average guy who's a heavyweight isn't built like that. If you think about it, you know, I don't know what to tell. I mean, because the higher in weight class you go, the less technique is there, and that's the thing women's MMA has been focusing on and been doing a pretty good job of it. Like I heard this a while ago, and I've heard this years and years and years ago when Joanna won her title, and it was women's MMA is usually around because of the culture with women fighting. Sadly, it kind of stunts their development. They're a little bit behind in terms of technique and what's good and what's popular and all that stuff like that. And they likened Joanna to the Chuck Liddell era. And I think that's pretty perfect, actually. Because if you look at what's come after and all that, you know, like Thug Rose, you could say it was almost Anderson Silva in like her aura for a little bit, like, but Wiley Zhang, you know, like we like 120 or 115 has had a lot of people, and it's kind of like for a minute it was like hot potato between, all right, here's Joanna, here's Rose, here's Jessica Andrade, here's Wiley Zhang, here's Rose again, here's Carla, here's Wiley Zhang again. You know, it kind of felt reminiscent to me of like the back in the day 205 race, you know? And Wiley Zhang is kind of Shogun-esque.
I can see a lot of comparisons in style.
Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, yeah. So, I mean, it makes, but that division's, it's needing some help right now, but not a ton. It's not, when I always say middleweight needs help, when I say middleweight needs help, I'm saying it's got 3 fighters I care about watching on like any given night.
Like I actually brought that up, you know, a few weeks ago, that strawweight's always been seen as sort of like the marquee women's division, but if you look at that sort of top band of fighters, they're all starting to get a little bit long in the tooth. Like Weili's 34,
Yeah.
Jan was 34 as well. You got Suarez 33, Lemos 36, Werner 35, Marina 37. We're going to need that sort of new blood to start coming through, or else we're going to get like a 135 situation where we have like the Ronda era fighters just turning back the new guard.
I hope not. What's Mackenzie Dern doing?
I think Mackenzie, because of obvious reasons, she's always going to be like 1 or 2 fights away, in my opinion. Like the UFC aren't going to give up on Dern.
Yeah, especially with how she's been looking lately. Ain't no chance. She got divorced and was like, I'm going back to being caked up. And it's like, oh no. Oh no, I do not need this temptation, this devil running around as I'm like Alexa Grasso's like just covering my eyes when she fights. No, mijo, don't.
How can you cheat on Alexa like this? Well, it's Alexa and Cheyenne. You polygamist.
Well, I would. Oh, don't call me that. I dated a girl who tried to make me one, and I was like, I'm okay. It was horrible experience. But I would choose Alexa over Cheyenne. Me personally, because I like champions. I like winners. That and Alexa Grasso gave me my favorite win in women's MMA history.
So this question here is from Jonic5, and it's a good question to ask based off live and also based off the main channel itself. What hypothetical event or situation do you think would make an interesting breakdown in the future?
Oh, there's so many.
Like, is there someone in particular you would love to do a retro review topic on?
Okay, that's a good way to think of it. I was thinking of a hypothetical situation that could happen in or like real MMA. I was like going, Yeltsin Almeida makes the comeback of the year by throwing a left high kick into a double leg. Like, yeah, get the hands up and then shoots in on him. Like, that sounds kind of funny. A retro review series. I'll tell you who. My favorite fighter of all time is Boss Rutan, and most Pancrase cards aren't very good from that era. But my favorite fight of all time is from that era, or my second favorite, excuse me. And a lot of Boss Rutan fights that are pretty insane. I think it's him and Jason DeLucia 2, where he ruptures his liver. Like, they have to take Jason DeLucia to the hospital. And, like, apparently now, like, after that fight, it's like, yeah, I can't have a beer without getting lightheaded because of how much damage he took to his liver. And that's kind of, to put it as lightly as I can, that's effing insane. That's ridiculous that someone can do that much damage to someone's body like that. That seems almost, like, unlawful. You could hurt someone like that. But, yeah, Boss Rutan would be one. I always love when we get to do Pride.
I would love to do Big Nog. Because I think
That's a good one. Yeah.
Like, Fedor obviously gets a lot of kudos. It's all like the great Pride heavyweight legend. So does Crow Cop. But for whatever reason, like, in my opinion, Big Nog was part of that trinity. But for whatever reason, he doesn't get the same love and appreciation as the other two do. And if you go and you watch some of Big Nog's fights in Pride and even in the UFC, I think he still had enough in the tank to get some good UFC fights. I think the chance to showcase one of those to that wider audience would be great. Like just thinking of like a short list off the top of my head, you could have done him versus Crow Cop with that great comeback win.
Heath Herring
when he won the belt. Bob Sapp, when Bob Sapp actually tried, he was one of the scariest fighters there. And you mentioned it before, like the Randy Couture fight in the UFC. I think that's a great like shortlist for people to choose.
Tim Sylvia fight's good too.
Good
because that's a comeback win. Yeah. People forget Tim Sylvia was not just piecing him up, but hurting Big Nog.
I honestly think that's probably one of Timmy's best performances, even though he lost.
Yeah, up until he gets guillotined, it's probably the best he's ever looked, honestly. Especially when you consider who he's fighting against, it's like, oh, that's easily the best he's ever looked. I've noticed that lately too, because when I was growing up, it was always Big Nog as number 2, right? But in recent years, I don't know what it is, but Crow Cop's kind of overtaken him in a lot of people's minds.
Do you think
I don't
it's
understand
style?
that at all.
Do you think that just Crow Cop being a striker just appeals a lot more to those sort of everyday fans that might not remember Pride?
Maybe because that, and he's a southpaw, so like casuals go, oh, he's using Conor McGregor style. I'm like, no. There goes half our fan base. Damn.
The amount of people who think that Conor invented shoulder strikes because of the cowboy fight, and I was thinking like Tito Ortiz and Mark Coleman were doing the same thing like 20 years ago.
It's like when Anderson threw that front kick. I knew so many people that were trying to tell me, like, that's the first time that kick's ever been thrown in life. And I was like, what are you effing talking? Because I was doing martial arts at the time. I was practicing that kick at the time. And so I saw that. I was like, oh, that's cool. That's a kick I've been working on. And people were like, that kick's never been thrown. I was like, Steven Seagal invented that kick. And it's like, really? Then how come my uncle is teaching me this kick? Like, how come... I was like, how come I'm learning this kick? And then I used to go and, like, when I would watch fights, I'd be like, hey, there's that kick getting thrown. Remember it. And, like, write it down in notes and be like, if you watch Alistair Overeem in Glory Kickboxing in K1, at this moment in this fight against Peter Aerts, he throws that kick. It used to drive me nuts.
I thought you were going to say Ralph Macchio and the Karate Kid.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, he did. the crane kick
Machida.
that
I think that's better
Machida
than
did.
Anderson
Yeah,
Vitor. That's always been one of my hotter
me too.
takes. And Machida finishing Randy with that kick was better than Anderson Vitor.
That was my KO of the year that year. Uh, I think, I mean, Vitor wasn't on TRT yet, so he wasn't as big at the time. Randy Couture was looking to make a serious run, but Dana hates him, so he made him fight Machida. Which you have to go through Machida at that point. In fairness, Machida had lost 2 in a row. Matchmaking makes sense. So
In
I've covered
terms
that
of the
card, so.
main channel, a lot of it is dependent on a few things. I always set myself the goal of trying to do two videos a month, and I like to try and tie it into things that are happening in the world of MMA, but also go back nostalgic. So I'll usually look at what's happening in the pay-per-view which is coming up and see if I can tie a video in some capacity. But also as well, I like to time it based off the year. So one of the things I've done for this year is I've been doing themed months. So we had like our women's themed month in March. We've got Pride Month coming up in June. Not that kind of Pride. I just want to stress to anybody who might be a little bit offended by that. And in September,
We have both. Okay.
we're going to be doing Hispanic Heritage Month. Which so I've got 2 ideas for videos on that one. One of the videos I know won't do well, but I think it'll be quite quirky to cover. I think you've always got to try and get that mix between things you want to make and things you know are going to attract a wider audience.
Yeah. I feel like there's like a weird blend. Ever since I joined and started working with you, one thing I like that you do is, and when I word it like this, I don't mean in a derogatory or condescending way towards their fan base, but I feel like because we have a lot of people who we have our fan base is a good mix of people who remember like a lot of stuff and they go, oh, I love seeing comments of like, oh, like I remember this from back in the day. It's so cool you're talking about this. And then you see stuff like, I had no idea X, Y, and Z. This is awesome. Like it's almost like, introducing things like that to them. So you have to I like that you make a mix of like, this will get a wide audience. This will be nostalgia and people who remember and know about this will like it. And maybe we can introduce new things to much
Well, that was
newer
one of the
fans.
approaches I always try to take. I think that there's other YouTube channels out there which can do the modern stuff and the sort of countdown-based stuff a lot better than I can. So I intentionally made that thought of, rather than being sort of like the 400th person to talk about Conor McGregor, I'm going to be the first person to talk about, say, Paul Harris or Megami Fuji. Yeah.
Oh, Megami Fuji. Awesome.
It's one of the least watched videos that we've done so far, which is a shame, but I kind of understand why. Yeah.
We get it.
In terms
Yeah.
of videos, I'd love to cover at some point. Obviously, we'll have to wait until the film comes out, but I would do a Mark Kerr retrospective. Obviously, try and time that for when Dwayne Johnson does his film. Which, by the way, have you seen the picture of Dwayne? That's sort of the first still of him as Mark Kerr.
It kind of blew my mind, honestly. I'm really curious too how they convinced The Rock to do this, because I don't know if anyone knows this. He puts liabilities in his contract. This is real, that he can't lose on screen. He legitimately tells other actors like, that doesn't work for me. Like that doesn't work for me and my millions, and like no one's around and it's awkward and millions. um, but I made a joke. I was like, oh, we're gonna see Mark Kerr be the one to take Fedor down and beat him like in this movie. But I hope they do it, like, because that is if you haven't seen the documentary, The Wrecking Machine or The Smashing Machine, unbelievable, and it's it's heartbreaking. So I'm really excited for this.
And the
Mark
other
Kerr
one I
story.
want to do, I'm putting it off on hold until we get the final conclusion. I want to cover the James Krause scandal.
Mm-hmm. We're still waiting on that, aren't we? I have a video idea for Mexican Heritage Month.
I'm tempted to hear this one. I'm looking forward to it.
the fall of Valentina Shevchenko.
I'm reaching for that off button. I'm kidding.
Trying to keep a straight face while saying that was pretty hard. No,
some people did
we joke here.
Yeah, some people did ask me, on that subject of which fighters I choose to put in the What Happened series. And most of the time, one of the things I try and avoid is I don't like choosing fighters who decline purely because of age. It's one of the reasons why I probably won't do Tony Ferguson in that series, because a lot of Tony's downfall is just the fact that he's getting on in years. Mm-hmm. So I usually like to try and go for guys where they maybe were in their primes at the time that they did start declining, or age wasn't the sole reason for that. So that's why you had people like Renan Barao, Graham Maynard, people like that. One I possibly would like to cover, I don't think he'll do well, Brett Rogers.
Yeah, that's a good one. From Bellator? No, that's Brett Rogers is the dude that
Fedor beat Strikeforce.
Yeah, where Fedor clobbers him and then uses his shoulder to knock him down. And then he got a title fight off of it. Yeah, Brett Rogers had a wild career for like a little bit.
And a lot of stuff behind the scenes as well, which I think could make it I could dissect a lot in that story.
There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
Well, this one has been listed. We'll try and keep this brief. Chad Bree wants to know, what's your favourite place to fart?
I thought about this one. I saw this, and I've actually been spending the last 2 days thinking about it. And my favorite place to fart, this is a hypothetical place to fart, of course. And it's in John Jones's car right before he gets in and I leave the car. That's my official answer. That's my official answer. I've been thinking about this for a while. I had a couple other places I would have liked to have farted that would probably rank among my favorite. One of them would be in front of a match, just to see if it. No, he goes back in. I've seen it. Don't ask why. It goes back in. He'll burn your butt. Don't do that, kids. I used to party a lot. Let's just say that. But another one was in my girlfriend's house in my ex-girlfriend's house when she's not there because I hate her. But then I realized, like, what am I talking about? Why air my dirty laundry out there? Let's make John Jones's car smell like really bad. I have IBS too, and I'm Mexican who eats a lot of spicy food. I throw down when it comes to the bowel movements of sorts. John Jones is gonna pull out of the Stipe fight if he smells one of my ones. Let's just say that. John Jones ain't never fighting again if he smells one of mine.
So this question here is from NHIL Usage Treble 1, and he says, would you guys ever do a top 10 GOATs video? So much talk on who's in the top 10 or on the Mount Rushmore, who has surpassed Khabib in GOAT status, etc. And I think it would be nice to see more professional takes. I'm going to be quite blunt with this one. It's never been something which I have really been all that interested in covering, mainly on two fronts. One, I think that the whole GOAT argument is...
It's hard.
It's hard. It's been played out a lot. And I think as well, there's too many intangibles. The sport's changed so much in these sort of like 20, 30 years that I don't think you can really compare sort of like eras. It's like Formula One. Like Formula One has the same kind of argument, but you can't compare someone from, say, Fangio's era to Michael Schumacher or Ayrton Senna. It's just the cars and the technology is just far too different. And I feel the same way about MMA. But also as well from a production perspective, I'm not challenged by making that kind of video. And it's something that a lot of other people have done. And I just sort of feel like rather than being one of many people covering the same subject, I get more enjoyment from covering the stories or the angles that I know other people aren't. And I know that maybe hurts in terms of the viewership, but, it's my niche.
Yeah. If at the most I can see us doing is one of two things. A rainy day, there's no fights on the weekend, but we want to keep INC's numbers up, or INC Live's numbers up specifically. And one, because you guys miss me. That's like the big thing is you guys like text me all the time, like, where are you, bud? And I'm like, oh, dude, there's no fights this weekend. I'm on a date. Um, but that's like the only thing I can see us doing it. And if you want, as a consolation prize, I'll give you my top five right now with no setup. Uh, GSP, Mighty Mouse, Aldo, Boss Rutan. Yeah, that's right. I have him in my top five. Um, and I gotta go with this is a weird one, but I gotta go with Henry Cejudo at five.
I think there's a lot of asterisks next to Henry Cejudo's resume.
Is it because of his head
No, it's
size?
not. I think that some of the, like I think Henry Cejudo is incredibly talented, and I do
Yeah,
want to stress I'm not sort of downplaying his abilities, but I don't think he beat Mighty Mouse. I thought it was a
no,
very
I don't
close
think so
fight, but I think
either.
Mighty Mouse just did enough.
Yeah,
He beat Dillashaw, but TJ should have
yeah.
been nowhere near flyweight.
Hmm.
And then Dominic Cruz, who was 3 years, who'd been on the couch for 3 years. That was
Marlon
his. That was
Moraes
his.
one.
Yeah. So like the biggest fight, the biggest win, was Marlon
It's
Moraes, which
Moraes.
was still incredibly impressive. But given how Marlon's declined, was that maybe a false dawn as well? So
I don't think so. I think Cejudo broke him. I think Cejudo broke him physically and mentally after that.
and personally, I picked Moraes to win that one. I have to
Me
be.
too.
You
I
go back
did.
to watch the preview show because that was the we
238.
238, which is a really good card. You covered it on one of the retro reviews. But
Unbelievable.
also as well, we were doing the preview shows back then. I had this sort of strange idea in my head, you know. I know somebody who rents like a photography studio,
Mhm.
and I rented it out to record the preview shows. But it was costing so much money. Lockdown happened. I couldn't keep it up, and then learned how to do OBS and kept the preview shows going in that regard.
Works out.
It
Hey,
did work out.
I mean, the only reason I have Cejudo at five is because once you get around four, it's just getting hard. And I always remember a promise I made to myself that if Cejudo would have beaten Aljo, I would have put him in that top three. I would have had him jump Aldo for me. That's why I was like, maybe I should give him some love and put him at five because the other one there is like there's like BJ, there's, I mean, I'm oh actually what am I talking? Well, I could put Fedor there. What am I talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, because funny, I think Stipe's higher on the heavyweight goat list, but on the real goat list, like of all divisions ever, I have Fedor higher. Funny how that works out, you know?
I think the thing that hurts Stipe is I think Stipe, and this is no fault of Stipe himself,
Mhm.
he doesn't have the mystique of Fedor. There was
No
something
one
about
did.
Fedor being this kind of white elephant the UFC could never get a hold of. And you heard these stories, oh, this quiet Russian guy in Japan, he's just steamrolling through all these great heavyweight fighters. If you were an American or a Brit and you were hearing that, you'd be thinking, oh God, I need to see this guy. And Stipe is just a normal bloke. And
I think
again,
that
it's
kind of
no
helps him.
fault to his own that he's just a normal bloke, but he doesn't have that sort of aura, as it were.
Yeah. And I think that's what made him so much more impressive to me. Was he was just like a normal dude, and here he is, like out there fighting Francis Ngannou, who looks like a Marvel superhero, and who looks like he's either Black Panther or a villain of Black Panther. Like Francis Ngannou is that dude's physique is unbelievable. Every time I see him, I just go, "You're real." Like him and Kamaru Usman have, as a straight man, I have no problem saying those two have the craziest physiques I had ever seen at one point. Kamaru Usman was like built like a tank, but and then here's this dude that sounds like Boomhauer and Stone Cold had a baby, who's a firefighter from Ohio. Like Cleveland, well, okay, give me a hell yeah! I'm gonna crack open some Stipe Weisers, dang old like, and it's like, dude, what is this? Like, this is the greatest thing ever. I put him over Fedor in my heavyweight goat list. I'm probably wrong. I'm willing to admit I'm probably wrong in this subjective goat ranking. I'm probably wrong there, um, but I'm putting Stipe there, and I hate it because that's why John Jones wants to fight him. John Jones is always looking to cloud chase after someone else's legacy.
And I think as well, another big issue when it comes to any kind of top 5, top 10 list is
Mm.
firstly, the target's always changing.
Yeah,
And that's a big problem because I did like a video a long time ago, one of the first videos I did when it was like the 5 greatest British fighters. And there's a lot of people I put on that list who are nowhere near it now because other fighters have come along which have long surpassed them.
Aspinall, yeah,
Like
Arlen
Tom Aspinall
Allen.
obviously getting the title there. Leon will be on there. I would still have Bisping
Bisping.
as
Oh yeah.
number one only because Leon's story isn't over yet.
Hmm.
Like if Leon was to get 4 or 5 title defenses, then he probably would surpass Bisping. But we're a long way away from that right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll do top fives for certain nations. I've done like one on Hawaiian fighters, Japanese fighters.
Poland. You did Poland.
Yeah, which is fun to watch because if you look at the analytics, it didn't really do all that well. But
Except in Poland.
yeah, like about 70% of the people who watched that video were Polish.
That's awesome. That's actually sick to me. I think that's really cool. It's like, that's us. We're on TV. Let's go.
I would switch, looking back now, I'd switch Gamrot and Carolina because I had them 4 and 5. I'd swap them around now, but outside of that, I'd keep it the same.
Yeah, makes sense. Because you had Joanna 1.
Ioana at 1, Jan 2, Khalidov 3.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
So this question here is from Zeus Ammon PT9DC. Rolls off the tongue. What is the sound of one hand clapping?
That's a 1,000-year-old question with no answer, but it's this.
No answer. Lise, listen up.
I can't make the sound. I hurt my hand yesterday working out in the yard, so I can't get the clap. That's actually really funny. I saw that one. I was like, that sounds dirty. And then when you said, no, it's a Simpsons reference. And I was like, what? And I started watching when I looked it up, I went, oh, I remember this episode now. It's a great episode.
And
I have a better question for you, to our fan who commented that. What's the sound of a tree that does a tree if it falls alone in the woods with no one around, does it make a sound?
but how can sound exist if there's no one there to hear it? Ooh.
I love his face afterwards.
Like there's something about that early Simpsons animation where it was a little bit janky, but it just adds to the charm.
It's fun. No one's complained about South Park's animation ever. So I mean, like it's all about the charm of it, I feel like.
And finally, this question is from Danny Waltzman 3386. Favorite MMA striker and favorite MMA grappler. We'll start with striker. Easy answer, Juliana Pena.
If you walk in front, that's a good one.
If you get hit, it's your own fault. In all seriousness, though, am I allowed to choose particular eras of fighters?
Absolutely.
I would go for pre-title Adesanya. Like
that's really good.
Izzy on his road to the belt was such a joy to watch. Like he was loose, he was lanky. Obviously he had the Gastelum fight, which I think showed he had the mental toughness as well. I just think he was really enjoyable to watch. And like I know a lot of people, like obviously Anderson's going to be up there as well, but I think Anderson maybe benefited from the quality of striking of his opponents maybe wasn't as high, so he looked a lot better than maybe he was, but he's still very talented. But I would probably say pre-title Izzy is my favourite striker. In terms of grappling, this one might surprise people. I always love Carlos Newton.
Yeah, that's a fantastic pick because he's in my top 5 grapplers ever to watch in terms of fun. Yeah,
because I have to admit I'm not a big fan of sort of like of control-based grappling and especially that kind of Dagestani wrestling style. But if you get somebody who attacks and is always chasing submissions and always trying to scramble and spin and get themselves into better positions, I think is thoroughly enjoyable. Like I wouldn't put them like ridiculously high up the list, but in terms of modern fighters, I love Tim Elliott for that same reason. I love Gillian Robertson for that same reason. Just that kind of aggressive scrambling based grappler I adore. But Newton's number 1 for me.
It's so much fun. They're so much fun to watch. Newton's such a good pick. It's funny you say Newton because there's a couple names I thought of for grapplers.
You're going to say Sakuraba, aren't you?
I mean, I'm trying not to. he was the first one that came to mind when I saw this question was Sakuraba, right? But there's a lot of like really good grapplers out there that are just a blast for me to watch. Uh, like Prime Kane isn't quite a grappler, but isn't quite a striker. But I feel like he's got to get some love in there because he would basically he had basically like almost a crazier version of Randy Couture's dirty boxing in his repertoire. And so there's a lot of grappling in that, but man, it's probably Sakuraba for me because Sakuraba would take you down. He's working for submissions, and then if you start to cover up and protect yourself, he's like doing like double chops or pulling your gi over your head and kicking you in the face. Like it felt like a real fight. Like I it felt weirdly like it felt less like one of my favorite things about his Gracie rivalry is I felt like he said, "No, we're not fighting in the dojo. You guys say this works on the street. I'm going to make it a street fight in a professional environment." And is like kicking them in the face, slapping them, kicking their legs relentlessly, breaking Henzo's arm. Probably my favorite moment ever. And him and Carlos Newton is, spoiler alert, one of our favorite fights in Pride history. Sakuraba and Carlos Newton. Yeah, it's Sakuraba, which is, I just can't deny it, you know? It's Sakuraba. If Gonzaga grappled more, maybe him. Habib has to get an honorable mention for me. Tony wasn't just a pure grappler, or else Tony, because Tony was always attacking. But it's Sakuraba.
And in terms of striker?
This is even harder, because, you know, Anderson Silva is a lot of fun to watch, especially in hindsight. But he does fail from the everyone alternates left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand. Made it really easy for him, and that's not his fault. But it is worth noting that the first time a guy double ups on one side or the other, he gets KO'd. You know?
Am I right in saying that was the first retro review we did that was a Patreon request?
It was. It was. It was by... I didn't tell him to do it. He was already going to join the Patreon once because he liked the channel. Then I joined, and then he had some extra money, and it was a friend of mine. He did it as a surprise, and then you said, "Hey, do you want to do it?" And he goes, "Yes, I know just the card. Joe can make fun of me for this." And because that's one of his favorite cards ever because of that moment. And I love that card because I felt like a prophet. I felt like it had to have been like a similar feeling to when like Moses came down from like and had like the tablets. Like here it says the first is Anderson Silva, you absolutely suck. Had to be like some moment like that. I felt amazing. But it's either Aldo or Boss Rutan, which isn't fair because those are my two favorite fighters of all time, right? And to be different, because I feel like a lot of people expect me to say Aldo here, but I'm gonna pick Boss. It's just so gruesome and violent, and I've never seen anything like it. I've seen guys who kind of fight like Aldo. I've never seen anybody that fights like Boss. Like in one of his fights, his hands, because there's no close fist punching and pancrase to the head. You have to palm strike. He was in a fight where his palms, like right here, were just black and blue from how hard he was palm striking his opponents. And I just go, what reality is he from? And it's funny, he's considered a striker, but he has more submissions than he has knockouts.
So does Butterbean.
Did not know that.
Butterbean has more submissions in MMA than he does knockouts.
What about in like mixed rules fights? Because I don't know if they count the Bart Gunn fight.
No, the Bart Gunn fight
a
doesn't
boxing,
count.
right? It's a boxing.
I actually do know that, I think it was Pride. Pride wanted to do Butterbean versus Bart Gunn as a legitimate MMA fight.
Because Bart Gunn fought. Didn't he fight over there?
Yeah, he had one fight, he fought Minowa.
Wow.
And I'm tempted to say, I think it might have been a doctor's stoppage, but I'm tempted to say he beat Cabbage.
I remember hearing he was like, well, obviously he was the tough enough. I'm not joking when I say that. He legitimately was a tough guy.
Yeah, and he was
Um,
massive as well. He was a big bloke.
mhm. I do. My favorite. He has one of my favorite moments in like just anything history. At the end of Red Dead One, when Billy and Bart Gunn come out and start scissoring everybody. OSW reference. One of my favorite jokes in OSW history. OC spoilers, dude.
Here's one thing I will ask when it comes to the retro review, Joe. Is there any card in particular that you're looking forward to doing or dreading doing? Like you mentioned, like 194. Is there anything else that you're a bit?
If a card I don't want to do ever. Um, there's a lot. Uh, I can tell you what I want to cover, but you have to promise me you won't mute my mic if you do. I say it. Uh, let's cover like probably Australia's biggest card ever. Wait, Carl, wait. No, just kidding.
Well, it's a good thing
No.
that 243 had a larger attendance, so I'm using that as the.
Damn.
In all seriousness, I think the UFC inflated that figure because I saw a lot more empty seats.
It makes no sense that it did that number. Um, I don't know. I probably wouldn't want to do. We're getting close to that 5 year mark. I don't know if it's quite 5 years yet, but I wouldn't want to cover Izzy knocking out my boy Rob. I wouldn't want to cover that.
I'm just doing the maths right now. I think that.
It's like 4.5, isn't it?
Yeah, so 237 is the most recent card that we're available to do.
Yeah, because 238 was like just barely.
Yeah, but 238 was a Patreon request, which was part of the reason why
that's
we
right.
did that.
That makes sense. Yeah, 37 is the earliest we can do. So obviously, when that comes up, I wouldn't want to do that.
Because I remember you saying, like, we, like, sort of like uncovering the veil a little bit here. We were talking about this, and I put forward the idea of you having to do Sakuraba versus Hoist, and you was just like, oh, no,
yeah,
please.
Yeah. I got to be honest. That fight is so good. Like, I've watched that fight 3 times in my life. That fight's great. But if anyone has seen Requiem for a Dream, I kind of consider that fight MMA's Requiem for a Dream. Like, I love Requiem for a Dream as a movie. It's a great movie. I don't want to watch that ever again. I would rather just say lines of that movie out of context to get a cheap laugh from my friends. Because that's a really hard and disturbing movie to watch. I just don't want to watch it again. And Sakuraba Hoist is so long that I just don't want to watch it. Like, it's such a long fight. I'd rather watch Henzo. You know what fight I would love to cover in the future? Just if I could cover just one fight in particular, not even the fight really, just the pre-fight talk. But Henzo and BJ Penn. Because Henzo says some of the most outlandish things ever. A Henzo retro review would be kind of fun because he is such a character, but I can't think of anything.
I think one I'm kind of dreading to an extent. It's ironic because it's going in the Hall of Fame. I don't think Silver Sun and 1's all that good. Like, people remember the finish, but like the rest of the fight, like 24 minutes of that fight is chill, lay print.
Oh, he's bashing on him. I've watched that fight recently, and he's putting it down on Anderson. I like that style of fighting though. I like that style of like close range because you don't want to overextend and get an arm or like your neck snagged and just beating Anderson. Like there's several times in that fight where not several, like 1 or 2 times in that fight where I think you could stop it.
I think it's one of those fights which would have been amazing in the moment, but I don't think it maybe ages all that well. Because I felt that same way with Holly versus Misha. I went back and rewatched that fight. It doesn't hold up.
I haven't watched that fight in a while, actually. But Holly's boring. Always has been. She's a verb. I've made her a verb.
That's one of the things, that I'm really proud of when it comes to the channel is that I have seen people using Holly Holm as a verb.
It's so awesome. One day, Daniel Cormier is going to slip up and use it on commentary. He's going to be like, yeah, Joey's just Holly Holming him in there. and he's gonna like wonder where he got that from, and I'm gonna be at home just going, I got him. I got him. That was me. I'm gonna show my kids one day, be like, I'm the one that invented the term for that. 'Cause I'm gonna still be smoking, so I'll probably sound like that. I'll probably sound like, "Hey, how's it going, guys?"
Isn't that just Vince McMahon?
I'm like, for a second I was like, oh, that sounds fun to kind of be like that, and then I remembered the last 5 years of him, and I went, never mind. Like, I love out of context Vince McMahon clips though. Come on out, you.
And
Chance.
and someone actually did edited the clip, so it's actually Vince coming out.
Yeah. That's my probably favorite Vince McMahon clip ever. Come on out, you. And then here comes no chance. That's what shit got. It's so funny. The best part is how they edit back in. What have you done to my family? That clip and the out of context when they're telling Vince McMahon before the clip starts, they're telling Vince McMahon, he's like, yes, he is the same race as you. Your illegitimate child is the same race as you. And so he takes it as, okay, you have to be Caucasian to be my son. So the clip starts when he says, if you're not Caucasian, leave. Out of context, that clip is incredible. Oh my god. What a horrible human being, though.
And on that cheery note, I think that's a good place for us to end this, Joe.
I think so too. All right.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here. We did this sort of like a little bit on the whim, the idea of doing a little bit of a Q&A. We just want to say to anybody who is observing, a very happy Memorial Day to everybody who tunes into this channel, anybody who has served for the military, not only in the US, but also across the world, wherever you come from. And I just want to say again a big thank you to anyone who's been supporting INC Live and supporting the main channel. June is going to be a big month for us. We're hoping that we should be getting 2 retro reviews done. Joe is going to be sending me the raw video for that later on this afternoon while I get this edited. For now though, it has been a great pleasure to be with you today on Memorial Day. My name has been Carl Bainbridge, that's been Joe Neal. Joe is going to be back in just a couple of days' time to talk about UFC 302. I will be joining him in 3 weeks' time as we preview UFC 303. This is the INC. Thank you so much for watching.